Picture an empty lot on a Monday morning. Dirt. Maybe some fencing. The kind of site you drive past and forget about because nothing interesting ever happens there. Now picture that same lot on a Friday. A 26-story residential tower is standing there. Fully assembled. 208 apartments, wired, plumbed, furnished. Real people could move in over the weekend. That's not a hypothetical. That happened. In China. And once you understand how it happened, and what's running underneath it, the number that sticks with you isn't the height of the building. It's not even the 5 days. It's what that project tells you about the gap that's opening up between China and everywhere else on Earth. Because this story isn't really about one building. It's about a fundamentally different philosophy of construction, one that's been quietly developing for decades. Scaling up without most of the world noticing, and is now at a size where catching up might not actually be possible. Let's start with the number that stops people cold. 5 days. 26 floors. 14,000 square meters of living space. 100 workers. 5 days. That's the Jingdu Holon building, a project assembled by Broad Group, a Chinese company based in Changsha, that on paper reads like a misprint. The kind of stat you assume someone got wrong and then go back and check 3 times. But here's the part people skip when they share that headline: the speed isn't the crazy part. The crazy part is the philosophy behind it. Broad Group doesn't build buildings on construction sites. They build them in factories. Every single apartment, walls, flooring, electrical wiring, air conditioning piping, plumbing, interior finishes, is assembled inside a controlled manufacturing plant before it ever touches the ground at the final address. By the time a module leaves the factory, it's essentially a finished room, packed into a stainless steel frame, sized to fit on a standard flatbed truck. When it arrives at the site, workers aren't constructing anything. They're stacking. And their production line completes one finished module every 21 minutes. Think about what that means. Not one wall. Not one floor panel. One complete, livable, furnished room. Every 21 minutes. Like a car rolling off an assembly line, except at the end of the line, what rolls out is a kitchen or a living room or a master bedroom. Ready to be bolted 26 stories high. That's not construction anymore. That's manufacturing applied to something the entire world has always treated as a craft. Now here's where things get really interesting. Because Broad Group isn't just fast. An independent specialist named Tony Frost, a modular building expert from New Zealand, spent a full week living inside one of their earlier 11-story buildings in Changsha. His verdict: it felt sturdy, almost like a concrete structure. The water systems were sophisticated. His only criticism? He wanted slightly different interior colors. A building assembled like furniture in under a week. Passed a real-world comfort test. With one minor cosmetic note. And because of those bolted stainless steel connections that allow rapid assembly, they work in reverse too. The entire 26-story Jingdu Holon building can be dismantled, loaded back onto trucks, and reassembled somewhere else. The building isn't a permanent fixture. It's closer to a relocatable product. Take a second and think about what that means if you're a government trying to house people quickly after a flood. Or a city facing a housing shortage that didn't exist 5 years ago. The building investment doesn't have to be permanent. It can literally move. Would you trust living inside one of these? Seriously, sit with that question, because the instinct is to say no. We've been conditioned to associate speed with cutting corners. But the data pushes back hard. These structures use what Broad Group calls B-core slabs, 2 steel sheets interconnected by short vertical tubes across the entire surface. The company claims they're 10 times lighter than traditional concrete floors and 100 times stronger. The buildings are engineered for earthquake resistance. And the company has said there's no theoretical height limit for this system, 200 floors is within scope. A skyscraper. Built in a factory. No theoretical ceiling. Now zoom out, because broad group is only one piece of this. Here's where the scale of what China is actually doing starts to feel genuinely difficult to process. The global modular construction market currently moves about $95 billion in annual activity. China's slice of that is growing at more than double the global rate, over 10% per year, compared to under 5% for everyone else. By 2032, China's modular market alone is projected to hit $29 billion. And in the first quarter of 2026, China's prefabricated building exports jumped 45% compared to the same period last year. The United States is one of the biggest buyers. Think about the geometry there for a second. China is exporting the factory, the method, and the finished modules, to countries that are still debating whether modular construction is a legitimate approach. Countries that are, in many cases, importing the solution to their own housing shortage from the country that invented a new way of manufacturing shelter. Most people completely miss what this actually means. It's not just that China builds faster. It's that China has industrialized something the rest of the world still treats as a trade. When you truly industrialize a process, the way Ford industrialized cars, the way Apple industrialized consumer electronics, the way China industrialized solar panels and EVs before anyone was paying attention, costs fall, quality stabilizes. And the gap between you and your competitors becomes structural, not temporary. Modular construction currently offers about 15 to 20% cost savings over traditional methods. But here's the part that hasn't gotten nearly enough attention. Industry analysts say those savings could double once production lines reach critical mass. The factories learn. Every project feeds data back into the next one. Waste drops. Precision improves. And the cost per square meter keeps falling while the speed keeps climbing. If this becomes the normal way buildings are made, what happens to the construction industry that built your city? But wait. The modular story is only half of it. Because while Broad Group is reshaping how apartment buildings work, another set of Chinese companies has been quietly solving a completely different part of the problem: what happens inside a building while it's being finished. Think about what construction actually looks like at ground level. Once the structure is up, a building still needs walls plastered, tiles laid, paint applied, ceilings drilled. That's where projects slow down. That's where labor shortages bite. That's where costs spiral on every continent. China's answer: send robots in. A company called Bright Dream Robotics, backed by property developer Country Garden, has deployed over 50 types of construction robots across real sites in China. Not prototypes. Not demos. Working robots, on active construction sites, doing the jobs that used to require skilled tradespeople. Wall plastering robots. Tile-laying robots with autonomous navigation and laser-guided brick placement at plus or minus 1 mm accuracy. Paint-spraying robots that cover 60 to 100 square meters of wall per hour, continuously, without breaks. Floor finishing robots. Robots that locate and plug screw holes in concrete after formwork is removed, using visual recognition and self-developed mortar systems. Chinese construction robots now handle between 60 and 80% of the work in plastering, painting, and bricklaying. And Chinese-made systems are priced 30 to 50% below equivalent European or American technology. Imagine walking onto a construction site in 2026 and watching a machine lay bathroom tiles while another one is already painting the hallway ceiling. 3 floors above. No shift changes. No lunch breaks. No workers filing workers' comp claims. Just continuous output, calibrated to the millimeter, hour after hour. That's not a future scenario. That's already deployed at scale in China. Now here's where things get really strange. The same company that builds the cranes and excavators used on those construction sites is also building the AI systems that make all of this work together. Zoomlion, a Chinese heavy equipment giant based in the same city as Broad Group, Changsha, runs what they call Zoomlion Smart City. It's a complex of 12 smart factories, over 300 production lines, including 20 fully automated, lights-out, lines where the lights are literally off because there are no humans inside. Just robots and AI, producing construction machinery around the clock. The output numbers are disorienting. Their AI-driven production system builds a new excavator every 6 minutes. A scissor lift every 7.5 minutes. A concrete pump truck every 27 minutes. A truck crane every 18 minutes. Non-stop. Managed by an AI scheduling system that coordinates over 100,000 material types simultaneously across 400 different product configurations. And since 2024, they've started deploying humanoid robots inside those factories, doing logistics, loading, pre-assembly, and quality inspection. These aren't Boston Dynamics-style showpieces. They're working production assets, connected to a cloud platform backed by a national supercomputing center with 59 petaflops of GPU computing power, feeding operational data back into a continuous improvement loop. And Zoomlion's stated plan, publicly, in their company disclosures, is to sell these humanoid robots externally. The construction robot is becoming a product. China is building the machines that build the buildings, and getting ready to sell those machines to everyone else. Seriously. Think about that supply chain for a moment. China builds the factory equipment. China builds the construction robots. China builds the modular apartments inside AI-managed facilities. China exports the finished modules to housing shortage markets around the world. And China sells the robots and factory systems to anyone who wants to replicate the process. That's not dominance in one part of construction. That's vertical integration of the entire chain. Now here's the piece that connects everything, and that almost never makes it into the coverage of any individual project. All of these systems talk to each other. Chinese construction companies are using building information modeling, BIM, not as a documentation tool the way most Western firms use it, but as a live operational layer. A digital twin of a building under construction updates in real time as modules are produced, as robots complete finishing work, as components travel from factory to site. Design changes are automatically synchronized down to the production line. The system recommends optimal process plans for new product configurations. Robots receive updated programming through over-the-air deployment. It's the same logic as a software update pushing to your phone overnight. Except what's being updated is the physical production process for a 26-story building. And the Chinese government isn't a passive observer of any of this. Their 15th five-year plan, covering 2026 to 2030, explicitly lists embodied AI and intelligent construction as national priority development tracks. City governments are required to promote prefabricated and smart construction methods. Public project bids are being scored on prefabrication usage, which means contractors who don't have factory-based methods are starting to lose work just because of government procurement rules. The market pressure and the policy pressure are pointing in the same direction at the same time. Here's what that looks like in real numbers. China's prefabricated building exports jumped from $1.47 billion in 2015 to $4.34 billion in 2025. That's a 3 times increase in a decade. And in just the first quarter of 2026, exports are already up another 45% year over year. The acceleration isn't slowing down. It's speeding up. The countries buying the most? United States, Indonesia, Malaysia, Australia. Countries that are, in many cases, facing their worst housing crises in a generation, and importing the answer from China. one flatbed truck at a time. Here's the uncomfortable question nobody in the traditional construction industry wants to sit with. How many more years before the economics become undeniable? Right now, modular construction saves 15 to 20% over traditional methods. Once production reaches true industrial scale, the kind of scale that already happened with EVs, already happened with solar, already happened with consumer electronics, analysts say that savings figure could double. At 30 to 40% cheaper, with delivery timelines measured in days instead of months. The conversation stops being about whether modular construction is viable and starts being about whether traditional construction survives as a primary method at all. And China's not waiting for that moment. They're engineering it. In 2025, when China was fighting COVID, they built a 25,000 square meter hospital in Wuhan in 10 days. Not as a permanent structure, as an emergency response. The same modular logic applied to a medical facility, at that scale, in that timeframe. Tells you something about what becomes possible when you've actually industrialized the process. That wasn't a one-time miracle. It was a system that already existed, doing what it was designed to do. The world noticed that story. What the world mostly missed was what it implied about everything else. Most countries talk about a housing crisis the same way you'd talk about a weather problem, as something happening to you that you're trying to manage. China looked at the same problem and treated it like a manufacturing challenge. And once you frame housing as a manufacturing challenge, the entire toolkit changes. You don't talk about permits and skilled labor shortages and supply chain delays. You talk about production rates, module standardization, logistics optimization, and factory throughput. That reframe is worth sitting with for a minute. Because the countries that are still in the housing is a construction problem mental model are going to keep managing the same bottlenecks, labor costs, project delays, rising material prices, indefinitely. The countries that shift to the housing is a manufacturing problem mental model have access to an entirely different set of solutions. China shifted that mental model at a national policy level roughly a decade ago. They're now a decade into the execution. And the gap in execution is becoming visible in the statistics. This changes everything about how you think about what's coming next. Here's where I'll leave you. Broad Group's U.S. division president, when asked about height limits for their stainless steel modular system, didn't talk about engineering constraints. He said, "We are leveraging stainless steel, which is strong enough that we can go as high as we can design. No theoretical ceiling. The same system that stacked 26 floors in 5 days, in principle, can go to 200. A super tall skyscraper, the kind of structure that takes 5 to 8 years to build conventionally, assembled from factory modules. In a fraction of the time, potentially at a fraction of the cost." That's not a vision statement. That's a company describing what their existing technology already allows, waiting for the right project. And while that project takes shape, the robots are already on the job sites, the factories are already running lights out. The export numbers are already accelerating, and the buildings are already being stacked on lots that were empty 5 days ago. The question was never whether this was possible. The question is who figures out what that means, and when.